Major, I need you to explain exactly what you mean by qualified.
Sir, my name is Ella Morrison. Call sign Wraith.
They thought she was just a logistics officer until 15 enemy jets appeared and she shocked the world. For 10 years, Ella Grant had filed reports and managed supply chains at Ramstein Air Base, her legendary past as the Air Force's deadliest fighter pilot buried beneath paperwork and silence. When enemy fighters breached their airspace and every pilot was grounded, the quiet woman in the logistics office calmly walked to the last operational F-22 Raptor. As she strapped in and fired up the engines, no one knew they were watching Wraith return to the sky. The morning briefing room at Ramstein Air Base buzzed with the usual pre-flight energy as pilots reviewed weather reports and mission parameters. At a desk in the corner, Major Ella Grant quietly updated logistics spreadsheets, her presence so unremarkable that most of the younger pilots had forgotten she was even there. At 42, Ella had the understated appearance of a career staff officer, graying brown hair pulled back in regulation-style wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of calm demeanor that suggested she'd spent her entire career behind a desk. Her uniform bore the ribbons of someone who'd served competently but without distinction, and her soft-spoken manner reinforced the impression that she was exactly what she appeared to be, a logistics officer who kept the base running smoothly. Major Grant called out Colonel James Mitchell, the wing commander. "Do we have the fuel allocation reports for today's training exercises?" "Yes, sir," Ella replied, handing him a perfectly organized folder. "All aircraft are fully fueled and ready for operations." What Colonel Mitchell and the rest of the base didn't know was that Major Ella Grant had once been Captain Ella Wraith Morrison, the most feared fighter pilot in the Air Force. 10 years ago, she'd held the record for air-to-air kills, had flown missions so classified that they didn't officially exist, and had earned a reputation for appearing out of nowhere to turn the tide of aerial combat. The incident that ended her flying career still haunted her dreams. Operation Nightfall, a classified mission over Syria where she disobeyed direct orders to save a downed pilot. The rescue had been successful, but the unauthorized deviation had cost her squadron leader his life when enemy fighters overwhelmed their position. The court-martial had been quietly dismissed due to the classified nature of the operation, but Ella had voluntarily transferred to logistics, carrying the weight of that decision for 10 years. Silent as shadows, deadly as lightning, had been the phrase used to describe her flying style. She could make an F-22 Raptor dance through the sky like a hummingbird could outthink and outfly pilots half her age, and had never lost a dogfight in over 200 combat missions until the day she chose to save one life and lost another. "Another quiet day in paradise," muttered Lieutenant Sarah Chen, one of the younger pilots, as she reviewed her training schedule. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to see some real action instead of just practice runs." Ella looked up from her paperwork, her gray eyes holding depths that the young pilot couldn't imagine. "Be careful what you wish for, Lieutenant," she said quietly. "Real action has a way of finding you when you least expect it." As if summoned by her words, the base's air defense radar began painting targets that would change everything. The first indication of trouble came as a subtle change in the radar operator's voice over the base intercom. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had been monitoring air traffic for 5 years, and his calm professionalism was legendary among the control tower staff. "Control, this is radar. I'm showing multiple unknown contacts bearing 045, range 200 miles, closing fast. Ella's hands paused over her keyboard as she heard the announcement. In the briefing room, pilots looked up from their charts with the kind of casual interest that came from years of false alarms and training exercises. "Probably just a navigation error," said Captain Mark Stevens, the squadron's most experienced pilot. "Or maybe some civilian traffic that forgot to file a flight plan." But Ella was already standing, her trained instincts recognizing something in Rodriguez's voice that the others had missed. She moved to the window overlooking the flight line where ground crews were performing routine maintenance on the base's complement of F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs. 15 contacts in formation, she thought, her mind automatically calculating threat assessments. Military spacing, no radio response. This isn't a navigation error. Control radar. Contact count is now 15 aircraft maintaining formation altitude 30,000 feet. No response to radio calls. The casual atmosphere in the briefing room evaporated as pilots realized this wasn't a drill. Colonel Mitchell grabbed the secure phone to contact higher headquarters, while his operations officer began coordinating with Air Defense Command. "All pilots to ready stations," came the announcement over the base speakers. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Ella watched as the pilots rushed toward the flight line, their movements sharp with adrenaline and purpose. She felt a familiar stirring in her chest, the call of the sky that she'd been suppressing for 10 years, the voice that whispered she belonged up there, not down here filing reports. The attack began not with missiles or guns, but with electronic warfare that crippled Ramstein's defensive systems. One moment, the base was preparing for a standard intercept mission. The next moment, every computer screen went dark and communication systems failed. "We're being jammed," reported the communications officer. "All frequencies are blocked and our radar is showing ghost returns." In the sudden chaos that followed, Ella moved with the calm efficiency of someone who'd faced electronic warfare before. While others struggled with dead computers and failed communications, she was already calculating vectors and response times in her head, her mind slipping back into the tactical thinking that had once made her legendary. "Sophisticated EW package," she analyzed. "They're not just jamming, they're spoofing our systems. This is a coordinated military strike." "Search," reported Captain Stevens. "We've got a problem. The electronic attack has corrupted our flight computers. None of our aircraft can launch without manual recalibration, and that's going to take at least 30 minutes. Colonel Mitchell's face went pale as he realized the implications. 30 minutes. Those bogies will be overhead in 15. Ella looked out at the flight line where ground crews were frantically trying to restart systems and prepare aircraft for launch. But she could see what the others couldn't. There was one F-22 Raptor sitting apart from the others, an older model that relied more on analog systems than digital computers. Aircraft 91-4003, she recognized. Early production model analog backup systems. She'll fly when the others won't. "Sir," she said quietly, "aircraft 91-4003 is still operational. It's an early production model with backup analog systems." "That's great, Major, but we don't have any pilots ready to—" Mitchell stopped mid-sentence as he saw the expression on Ella's face. For a moment, the mask slipped. The quiet logistics officer was gone, replaced by someone whose eyes held the cold calculation of a predator. "Sir," Ella said, her voice carrying an authority that hadn't been heard in 10 years, "I volunteer to take the mission." The briefing room fell silent as everyone stared at the quiet logistics officer who just volunteered to take on 15 enemy fighters single-handedly. Colonel Mitchell stared at Major Ella Grant as if seeing her for the first time. The quiet logistics officer who'd been filing reports for 10 years was standing before him with the bearing of someone accustomed to combat command. "Major, I need you to explain exactly what you mean by qualified." Mitchell said, his voice tight with the pressure of 15 enemy aircraft bearing down on his base. Ella removed her glasses and set them on the desk, a simple gesture that somehow transformed her entire appearance. The soft-spoken administrator was gone, replaced by someone whose eyes held the steely focus of a warrior. "Sir, my name is Ella Morrison, call sign Wraith. I flew F-22s for 8 years before transferring to logistics." The silence in the briefing room was deafening. Several of the younger pilots exchanged glances, but Captain Stevens went pale as recognition dawned. "Jesus Christ," Stevens whispered. "You're the Wraith, the pilot who took out 6 MiGs over Syria in a single engagement." "That mission is still classified," Ella replied simply. "But yes." Lieutenant Chen looked confused. "Sir, I don't understand. If Major Grant is a combat pilot, why is she working in logistics?" "Because I killed my squadron leader," Ella thought, the memory of Operation Nightfall cutting through her like a blade. "Because I chose to save one pilot and lost another. Because some mistakes you carry forever." Mitchell was already pulling up personnel files on his tablet, his fingers flying over the screen as he accessed classified records. What he found made his hands shake. Captain Ella Morrison, 127 combat missions, 23 confirmed air-to-air kills, Distinguished Flying Cross with 3 oak leaf clusters, Silver Star for actions over. Mitchell stopped reading as he reached the classified sections. "Major, why didn't you tell us?" "Because I wasn't supposed to," Ella replied. "My transfer to logistics was part of a classified reassignment after Operation Nightfall. I've been on inactive flight status for 10 years. And because every time I close my eyes, I see Jake's F-22 spinning toward the ground in flames," she added silently. "Because I've spent 10 years wondering if saving one life was worth losing another." "But you can still fly." Ella looked out at the F-22 Raptor sitting on the tarmac, its sleek form calling to her like an old friend and an old enemy. "Sir, you never forget how to fly. You just forget why you stopped." The radar operator's voice cut through the tension. "Control bogies are now 100 miles out and accelerating. Estimated time to base perimeter is 8 minutes." Mitchell looked around the briefing room at his grounded pilots, then back at the woman who just revealed herself to be one of the Air Force's legendary aces. "Major Morrison Grant, whatever your name is, I can't officially authorize this. You're not on flight status, you haven't flown combat in 10 years, and you'd be going up against 15 aircraft alone." "Sir," Ella said, already moving toward the door, "sometimes official authorization is a luxury we can't afford." Just like Operation Nightfall, she thought. Sometimes you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. Captain Stevens stood up. "Colonel, I've read about the Wraith's missions. If anyone can pull this off, it's her." "But the risk," Mitchell began. "Sir," Ella interrupted, "the risk is that 15 enemy fighters are about to attack this base with 3,000 personnel on it. I can either try to stop them, or we can all wait here and hope our ground-based defenses work." Through the window, they could see the base's surface-to-air missile batteries swiveling toward the incoming threat. But everyone knew that SAMs were designed to supplement air defenses, not replace them. Ella was already in the equipment room pulling on a flight suit that she hadn't worn in a decade. The familiar weight of the survival vest, the feel of the helmet in her hands, the ritual of pre-flight preparation, it all came flooding back as if she'd never stopped flying. Jake's voice echoed in her memory, "Wraith, you're the best pilot I've ever seen. Don't let anyone tell you different." "I let you down, Jake," she thought as she zipped up the flight suit. "But I won't let these people down." "Major," said Master Sergeant Williams, the crew chief for Aircraft 91-4003, "I've got her fueled and armed with a full load of AIM-120s and AIM-9s. She's not the newest bird in the fleet, but she's reliable." "That's all I need, Sergeant," Ella replied, running through her mental checklist. "How long since her last maintenance check?" "Completed yesterday, ma'am. She's ready to fly." Ella nodded, feeling the familiar calm that had always descended on her before combat. The nervousness, the doubt, the 10 years of buried memories, all of it faded away as her training took over. Silent as shadows, deadly as lightning, she whispered to herself, repeating the phrase that had once struck fear into enemy pilots across 3 theaters of operation. "For Jake, for the base, for everyone who's counting on me." The F-22 Raptor climbed through 20,000 feet as Ella Wraith Morrison felt the familiar embrace of her natural element. 10 years of desk work fell away like discarded clothing. As her hands found their rhythm on the controls, her eyes automatically scanning the tactical display for threats. "This is where I belong," she thought, feeling the aircraft respond to her touch like a living thing. "Not behind a desk, but up here where I can make a difference." Wraith Control. Bogies are now 50 miles northeast altitude, 25,000 feet still in formation. Count is confirmed at 15 aircraft. Copy, Control. I have them on radar. What Ella saw on her display made her blood run cold. 15 aircraft in perfect attack formation, moving with the precision that spoke of extensive training and hostile intent. These weren't lost civilian aircraft or navigation errors. This was a coordinated military strike designed to cripple one of NATO's most important air bases. "They're good," she analyzed, studying the formation. "Professional spacing, electronic warfare coordination, disciplined approach. This isn't some rogue operation. This is military precision." "Control Wraith. Be advised these are definitely military aircraft. I'm reading advanced electronic signatures consistent with enemy fighters." "Understood, Wraith. You are cleared to engage." Jake's voice whispered in her memory, "When you're outnumbered, don't fight fair. Use every advantage you have." Ella banked her aircraft toward the incoming formation, her mind automatically calculating angles, speeds, and engagement parameters. 15 against 1 were impossible odds by any conventional measure, but Ella had never been conventional. Silent as shadows, deadly as lightning, she whispered, settling into the combat mindset that had made her legendary. The enemy formation was spread across 20 miles of sky, flying in 3 groups of 5 aircraft each. Ella's tactical computer identified them as advanced fighters, possibly Su-35s or similar aircraft with full air-to-air loadouts. "They're confident," she observed, "flying in tight formation, no defensive maneuvering. They think they own this airspace." Wraith Control. Enemy aircraft are now 30 miles from base perimeter. Whatever you're going to do, you need to do it fast. Ella didn't respond immediately. She was studying the enemy formation, looking for weaknesses patterns, anything that would give her an advantage against overwhelming odds. Then she saw a gap in their electronic warfare coverage a blind spot in their formation that would allow her to approach undetected. There, she thought, marking the approach vector in her mind. They're jamming forward and to the sides, but they've left a hole in their rear coverage. Control Wraith going silent. I'll contact you when the threat is neutralized. Ella switched off her radio and activated the F-22's stealth systems, effectively disappearing from both friendly and enemy radar. The Raptor became a ghost in the sky, invisible to electronic detection and nearly impossible to spot visually. Now, I'm in my element, she thought, feeling the predatory calm that had made her the Air Force's most feared ace. Silent as shadows, Ella approached the enemy formation from below and behind, using the F-22's superior stealth characteristics to close within missile range undetected. Her first target was the trailing aircraft in the left formation, a clean shot with an AIM-120 that would announce her presence in the most dramatic way possible. For Jake, she thought her finger hovering over the trigger, and for everyone counting on me. Fox 3, she called out to herself, launching the radar-guided missile at maximum range. The AMRAAM streaked through the sky at Mach 4, its active radar seeker acquiring the target in the final seconds of flight. The enemy aircraft exploded in a brilliant fireball that immediately alerted the remaining 14 fighters to her presence. 1 down, Ella counted. 14 to go. Now, the real fight begins, she muttered, pulling her aircraft into a climbing turn as enemy missiles began filling the sky around her. The next few minutes were a deadly ballet of aerial combat, with Ella using every trick she'd learned in 8 years of flying and 127 combat missions. She dove through cloud layers to break radar locks, used the sun to mask her approach, and exploited the F-22's superior maneuverability to stay ahead of enemy missiles. Jake's training echoed in her mind. Speed is life, altitude is life insurance, and surprise is the best weapon you have. Fox 2, she called launching a heat-seeking AIM-9 at an enemy fighter that had gotten too close. The Sidewinder found its target, sending another aircraft spinning toward the ground in flames. 2 down, 13 left. The enemy pilots were better than Ella had expected. They adapted quickly to her tactics, spreading their formation to deny her easy shots and coordinating their attacks to force her into defensive positions. But they had made one critical mistake. They were fighting Ella Morrison's war now in the sky, where she had never been defeated. Deadly as lightning. With 13 enemy aircraft remaining, the battle entered a new phase. The enemy pilots, realizing they were facing something extraordinary, abandoned their tight formations and began fighting as individuals, each trying to survive an encounter with a legend they'd only heard whispered about in intelligence briefings. They know who I am now, Ella thought as she watched the enemy formation scatter. They've heard the stories about Wraith. Silent as shadows, she whispered, using a cloud bank to disappear from visual contact before emerging behind an enemy formation. Deadly as lightning. The psychological warfare was as important as the physical combat. Enemy pilots were making mistakes, breaking off attacks too early, wasting missiles on defensive shots. Fear was spreading through their ranks like a virus. Jake's voice echoed in her memory, "The mind is the most important weapon in aerial combat. Break their confidence, and you've already won." 3 more missiles, 3 more kills. The enemy formation was beginning to break apart as pilots realized they were facing something beyond their experience. Ella could hear the fear in their radio chatter, could sense the moment when confidence turned to desperation. She'd seen it before in other engagements, the point where superior numbers meant nothing against superior skill. Fox 3, Fox 3, Fox 2. 3 more enemy aircraft fell from the sky, their pilots never knowing what had hit them. 10 down, 7 left. The remaining 7 aircraft were scattered across 50 miles of sky, no longer fighting as a coordinated unit, but as individuals trying to survive. Ella methodically hunted them down, using the F-22's advanced sensors and superior weapons to engage at ranges where they couldn't effectively fight back. This is what I was born to do, she realized. Not filing reports or managing supply chains, but this protecting people who can't protect themselves. Each kill brought a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. These were skilled pilots, probably with families waiting for them at home. But they'd chosen to attack her base to threaten 3,000 innocent people, and that made them legitimate targets. "I'm sorry, Jake," she thought as she lined up another shot. "I couldn't save you, but I can save them." Fox 3. She called launching another AMRAAM at a fleeing Su-35. The missile tracked true, eliminating another threat in a brilliant explosion. 11 down, 6 left. The enemy pilots were becoming increasingly desperate, making wild maneuvers that burned fuel and degraded their aircraft's performance. Some were trying to flee, others were making suicidal attacks, but all of them were learning the same lesson that dozens of pilots had learned before them: you don't fight Wraith and win. The last enemy aircraft was different from the others. Its pilot was skilled enough to present a real challenge, turning the final engagement into a classic dogfight that tested every aspect of Ella's abilities. "He's good," she admitted, as the enemy pilot pulled his aircraft through a series of defensive maneuvers that would have defeated a less experienced opponent. Professional, disciplined, skilled. In another time and place, we might have been allies. "Come on," she muttered, pulling her aircraft through a high G-turn that would have grayed out a less experienced pilot. "Let's see what you got." The enemy pilot was fighting for his life, using every advantage of his aircraft's design to stay alive in a fight he couldn't win. He dove toward the deck, hoping to use terrain masking to break Ella's radar lock, then climbed back into the sun to deny her a visual shot. "He's trying to get me to make a mistake," Ella realized, "trying to force me into an overshoot or a bad angle. But I've been doing this longer than he's been alive." The dogfight lasted 3 minutes, an eternity in aerial combat, with both aircraft dancing through the sky in a deadly ballet of thrust and counterthrust. But experience and superior equipment eventually told. Jake's final lesson echoed in her mind. Sometimes the hardest thing about being a fighter pilot is knowing when to pull the trigger. Fox 2, she called launching her final AIM-9 Sidewinder. The heat-seeking missile tracked the enemy aircraft's exhaust signature, detonating close enough to send the fighter tumbling toward the ground in a ball of flame and debris. 15 down, 0 left. "Control Wraith! All hostile aircraft destroyed, returning to base." The silence on the radio lasted for several seconds before the controller responded, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. "Wraith control. That was incredible. The entire base is watching the radar replay. 15 kills in 20 minutes, that's got to be some kind of record." "Just doing my job, Control," Ella replied, but her hands were shaking slightly as the adrenaline began to wear off. "I did it," she thought. "I actually did it. 15 enemy fighters, and I got them all." As she flew back toward Ramstein, Ella could see emergency vehicles racing across the base, responding to reports of an air attack that had been neutralized before it could begin. Ground crews were already preparing to recover her aircraft, while intelligence officers were undoubtedly analyzing the engagement data. Jake would be proud, she thought, feeling tears threatening to fall. I finally did something right. Wraith Control. The wing commander wants to speak with you immediately upon landing. Copy, Control. Tell him I'll be right there. But even as she acknowledged the call, Ella was already thinking about what came next. She'd broken cover, revealed her identity, and demonstrated capabilities that were supposed to remain buried. The quiet life she'd built in logistics was replaced by questions she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. But maybe that's okay, she thought, as the runway came into view. Maybe it's time to stop hiding from who I really am. The F-22 touched down on Ramstein's main runway with the precision that came from thousands of hours of flight time. As Ella taxied toward the parking area, she could see crowds of personnel gathering to watch the aircraft that had just saved their base. Silent as shadows, deadly as lightning, she thought one final time, but maybe it's time to step into the light. 7. Hao Ket, Tas Jong 402. The sign on the door read, Advanced Fighter Tactics Training Center, but everyone on base knew it simply as Wraith's School. Inside the nondescript building, Major Ella Morrison was doing what she'd always done best, teaching young pilots how to survive in aerial combat. The key to winning a dogfight, she told her class of 12 hand-picked pilots, isn't superior technology or overwhelming firepower. It's thinking 3 moves ahead of your opponent and never ever giving up. The students hung on every word. These were the Air Force's best young pilots selected for advanced training, with the woman who'd become a legend overnight. The story of her single-handed destruction of 15 enemy fighters had spread throughout the military, inspiring a new generation of aviators. But for Ella, the real healing had come from finally confronting her past. The classified debriefing had revealed the full truth about Operation Nightfall, that her squadron leader Jake had been flying a damaged aircraft, that his death hadn't been her fault, and that the pilot she'd saved had gone on to rescue dozens of others in subsequent missions. "Ma'am," asked Captain Lisa Rodriguez, one of the program's first graduates, "how do you stay calm when you're outnumbered 15-1? Ella smiled, thinking about the question she'd asked herself that day 3 months ago. You remember that fear is just another piece of information. It tells you the stakes are high, but it doesn't tell you what to do about it. And you remember that you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone counting on you to come home." The Advanced Fighter Tactics program had become one of the most sought-after assignments in the Air Force. Pilots competed for the chance to train with Wraith to learn the techniques that had made her the most successful fighter pilot of her generation. On the wall of her office hung a photo of her old squadron with Jake's face circled in red marker. Below it was a simple inscription, "For those who gave everything so others could fly." Silent as shadows, deadly as lightning, she said at the end of each class the phrase that had become the unofficial motto of the training center. After class, Ella walked out to the flight line where her F-22 sat waiting for the afternoon training mission. She'd been offered promotions medals and prestigious assignments, but she'd turned them all down. This was where she belonged, in the cockpit of a fighter aircraft, passing on the knowledge that had taken her a lifetime to acquire. The quiet logistics officer was gone forever, replaced by someone who'd found peace with her past and purpose in her future. Ella Morrison was no longer hiding from who she was. She was using her skills to ensure that the next generation of pilots would be ready for whatever challenges awaited them in the sky. As she climbed into the cockpit and fired up the engines, Ella smiled at the thought that somewhere in the sky, her former students were flying their own missions, carrying forward the legacy of excellence that defined the fighter pilot community. Silent as shadows, deadly as lightning, she whispered and took off into the blue sky that had always been her home.